The discussion of the greatest of all time in the UFC is always a controversial topic amongst MMA fans. With pound-for-pound rankings fueling the debate, several fighters across different weight classes have made their cases for the title of the greatest to step inside the octagon, from the creativity of Johnny Bones Jones to the dominance of Khabib Nurmagomedov. Today our focus is on the top 5 welterweights in UFC history, and if you train martial arts yourself, don't forget to subscribe to my newsletter, the link is in the description. Starting at number 1, we have the legendary George "Rush" St Pierre. George St Pierre is possibly the most talented UFC fighter ever. He stood in a league of his own during his time as the welterweight champion, and he excelled not only due to his superior athleticism, but also because of his unparalleled discipline in the ring. Starting with a background in karate, GSP recognized his grappling weaknesses early in his MMA career and dedicated himself to mastering the craft. He became a very well-rounded fighter, and with his wrestling skills proving to be a significant asset throughout his career. George St Pierre was very strategic throughout his fights, and it was very evident when you watched him compete. He remained composed and capable of outperforming his opponents at their own game. His experience in striking, wrestling, Muay Thai, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was world-class, and he utilized these skills to dominate his adversaries. Notably with GSP, he avenged the only 2 losses on his record at the hands of Matt Hughes and Matt Serra, and he finished both of them in the rematch in dominant fashion. There's no denying that GSP is a legendary former welterweight champion, and he remains the greatest 170-pounder to compete in the UFC. In fact, he may well be considered the best fighter to have ever graced the octagon. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Nigerian nightmare, Kamaru Usman. Kamaru Usman is a former UFC welterweight champion, and with Kamaru Usman's success, it can be attributed to no small part to his coach Trevor Whitman and a year-round training regimen under top-tier coaches. Usman's biggest strength was his chain wrestling combined with his well-rounded skill set, and made him a force to be reckoned with in the welterweight division. His legendary run at welterweight included an impressive 15 straight victories, breaking George St Pierre's record for most wins at 170 pounds. He has notable wins over Kobe Chaos Covington, Tyron Woodley, Gilbert Burns, and Damian Maia, and he's solidified himself amongst the top welterweights in the UFC. Coming in at number 3, we've got Tyron Woodley, who is a former UFC welterweight champion. One of Woodley's greatest strengths is in his wrestling. He's a former NCAA Division I wrestler, and Woodley would often grind down his opponents with his grappling, taking his safety-first approach that led many fans to deem him a boring fighter. And although Woodley wasn't one of the most exciting fighters in the UFC, it was more so once he became a champion that this was the case. He did take less risks and played a safer style of fighting, which tended to be quite boring to watch. He definitely could be exciting at times, and when he unleashed his deadly overhand right that flatlined many of his opponents, it was something to witness. His powerful striking and aggressive approach propelled him through the welterweight rankings. It led to an impressive knockout victory over the then champion Robbie Lawler, and Tyron Woodley claimed the welterweight championship. Coming in at number 4, we've got Matt Hughes, and back in 2006, the UFC marketed Matt Hughes as the greatest welterweight of all time, and they probably weren't too far off. Hughes debuted in the octagon way back in 1999, but it was when he returned to the promotion in 2001 following a short period away that he really made an impact. In Hughes' return, he slammed Carlos Newton right on the mat as hard as he could, knocking him out and claiming the welterweight title. He then went on to reel off 5 successful title defenses. He crushed the likes of Frank Trigg and many others. In 2004, he did lose his title to BJ Penn in an upset. He did beat BJ Penn in the rematch and also crushed the legendary Royce Gracie in a non-title bout. He was one of the UFC's most dominant champions in his prime, and Hughes remains one of the greatest welterweights in the promotion's history and one of its greatest fighters ever. Coming in at number 5, we've got ruthless Robbie Lawler. While crowning Robbie Lawler as the greatest welterweight in UFC history might be a bit of a stretch, it's undeniable that he stands out as one of the most thrilling UFC competitors at this weight class for his time. With a debut in the octagon dating back to the 2002 and ongoing participation even 2 decades later, Robbie Lawler has left an incredible mark on the sport, and 2 of the most memorable title bouts in the promotion's history are a credit to him. Initially, when Robbie Lawler came on the scene, he was just an electrifying and unpolished brawler. He did secure some remarkable victories while enduring a few disappointing setbacks. With these setbacks, it did lead to his departure from the promotion back in 2005, and it took nearly a decade for him to return back to the octagon. When he returned, he was straight back to his winning ways, getting wins over Jake Allenberger, Matt Brown, and Josh Koscheck. One of the best moments of his career came in late 2014 when he beat Johnny Hendricks to claim the welterweight gold. Although Robbie Lawler's championship reign did only last 2 years, his 2 most successful title defenses notably were against Rory McDonald and Carlos Condit, and it became an instant classic, solidifying his name in the history books. Following his loss of the title to Tyron Woodley in 2016, Lawler did face some challenging times. Nevertheless, during this phase, his bouts with Donald Cerrone and Ben Askren were wildly captivating, undoubtedly cementing Lawler's position amongst the best welterweights of all time. So there we have it, guys. There's my list for the top 5 UFC welterweights of all time. If you do like this content, make sure to subscribe.